Hi there, it's Mary Maguire here, and I'm delighted to be with you for this short live session on a beautiful spring day here in England. It's the 4th of March, and it's the second working day into International um, Women's History Month, but also it's the lead up to International Women's Day, which is what I'm here to speak to you about. Obviously, it's sometimes shortened to IWD, International Women's Day. So, I want to talk to you today about some of the things that are behind the theme for this year. So, the theme for this year is Accelerate Action. Um, and that's really in recognition of the many ways that action hasn't been taken, or that the gaps between men and women in the workplace and the outcomes in terms of career success and progression are still very different between the genders. Now, I spoke about some of that in day one, which you can see in my feed. And in that, I talked about some of the structural issues and the different levels of thinking we can have in terms of thinking about why this inequality matters, why it happens, what can be done about it, what we need to think about. Each of the successive days will be covering a bit more about that. I'm Mary Maguire. I'm the host of these, but I'm also the author of the Edge series, and we have the Inclusion Edge, which is about diversity, equity, inclusion, how leaders can do it better, and the Female Edge, helping women to find more success in the workplace. So, I wanted to talk today about how we can build safe, supported spaces for women in the workplace to help them to feel more confident in their role, feel that they have the support around them that they need, that they can find the success that they are looking for, and maybe why that needs to happen and how we can do that. So, when we think about building safe, supportive spaces, we often don't think of the reason why. Um, now, the picture is definitely changing, but the higher up the echelons of almost any organisation or political party or other public body we go, the less women we see in the positions of power. I think that's pretty much across the world. There's very few places where that bucks the trend. So if you're the woman who's first going into that, or if you're the only in that environment, then that can actually have a quite a profound effect on your confidence, especially since we see that, as a recent report from the Women in the Workplace that McKinsey runs every year said, women are still undermined in meetings, treated as if they're from a much more junior role than they are, overtalked in meetings. And we know that these um, habitual, what we often call microaggressions, are to do with the fact that there's an implicit bias that men have more authority, more natural leadership ability than women. And yes, that's changing. So if you're the only woman, that can be quite difficult. And I just want to share a little story with you about a woman I know who joined a board, and she was the only woman joining that board. Now the board sort of knew that there was this new member and it was a female member, but they were all gathered together. They knew each other well. They'd been on the board together for several years, and the new member of the board came in very excited and went up to very confidently went up to the first person in the room that she met, and she put out a hand to say hello, and he went, "Oh, yes." And he gave her his empty coffee cup and then turned round and carried on speaking to his colleague. Now, obviously, there was a little bit of a just in the moment and didn't think about it, but there was also all sorts of things that would happening that wouldn't have happened if that had been a new male board member. And it's just an example of how there's different things that play that can be difficult and undermining for women when they are in the minority. Now, them safe, supportive spaces that are needed to be built, they're predicated on this idea of psychological safety. How do we build a psychologically safe culture and environment for people to thrive? Now, if you are already part of the majority culture or the majority identity in that organisation, it's not something you have to think about because there's a certain implicit understanding that you belong. But when you come from outside of that culture, there's an implicit understanding that you don't quite belong, and therefore there's all sorts of power plays that can be very subtle but playing out. So psychological safety is, first of all, a recognition that environments don't feel safe equally to everyone, but also that giving support to people who are in the minority in terms of identity or representation can help them to be able to find their way and to be able to perform quicker. It also helps to put some guardrails on maybe the behaviours which are less helpful from more dominant players in the environment. And we are seeing obviously examples of that very clearly played out at the moment in some political environments, which I won't go into in detail here, but where there is a very strong political or leadership model that is very much about pure strength and about the cult of that personality dominating at any cost for the sake of their own ends, that creates a very unsafe environment for everyone else. And that happens in all sorts of environments. So, psychological safety is important for everyone, but particularly people who may be poorly represented. And how can we do that? So there's lots of ways we can do that. Obviously, there's lots of supports that can be put in around the organisation, such as whistleblowing and also employee assistance groups, and also regular support from line managers and so on. But we also know that there's real value in creating network and employee groups. So, where they are mature and they're well supported by the executive and well sponsored, they can make a real difference, not only to the people in them, so particularly for women in the organisation, female employees that have a group. It can also be carers or mothers or even parents. And that can really help people to bring their insights, their observations, their experiences to a group that feels safe and maybe share that and get ideas, get support. And we know that has enormous impact positively on an organisation. It can also help the organisation to get feedback about how to help with things like policy changes or process changes or working pattern changes, which are very small adjustments but make a big difference to certain groups in the employee groups. So it can be one way of helping to create it. And I would imagine that many of you in your organisations already have what we call employee resource groups or affinity groups that people can go to. But it's not for everyone. Not everyone actually finds that easy or valuable. And the other thing that's the reality is if there's a big difference in the hierarchy of the employees that go there, that can be difficult as well. That can be challenging for some either more junior or more senior to feel that they can fully participate and be themselves. So another way we can do that is thinking about sponsors and allies. How can we create opportunities for sponsors and allies in an organisation? So there's a slight difference in them. Sponsors are organisational defined, so they're often senior executives, senior managers in the organisation who are giving a group, either a group of people or a group of individuals, that they can be there for. And the idea of a sponsor is somebody that can give you easy access to them if you wanted to talk things through. They can help with decision making if some of the people that they're sponsoring need some support with that. Or they can be their voice to advocate for them if something's being considered, such as a special project. Allies are slightly different in terms of that's really defined by the individual. So the individual finding people that they've worked with who either have been particularly influential in their career, maybe an ex boss or somebody that used to run a company that they worked with, or somebody in their current organisation who they admire from a distance and believe that they can learn a lot from. And they actually then choose to go out and create that relationship. And an ally can do something similar to sponsor but different. So allies can be there very much as a sounding board, but they're usually not in the rung of hierarchy, if you like, of the organisation, where sharing things that are more difficult, have been more challenging, maybe things that are to do with other colleagues or peers, will not in any way either compromise the individual in their position or even compromise the ally in terms of being able to have to be involved in any decision making around it. but they can be a very useful sounding board. They're a little bit like a coach, but often untrained in terms of they can give feedback in a way that is very helpful at the time. So, sponsors and allies is another way we can create both psychological safety and supportive spaces. And then the final one, and I think the one that we're seeing a huge amount of pressure now, and a lot of organisations may be second guessing because, again, of the changes in the US administration, is initiatives which are specifically to do with that underrepresented group. So, this time, in this particular instance, women only initiatives, but also they could be for people of different racial groups that are underrepresented. They could be people who have disability status, LGBT status, and actually doing some support around them. And there's different ways that that can be done. It can be a formal leadership program. It can be an informal but facilitated group process within the organisation. A little bit about like employee resource groups, but a little bit more support around it. Or it can be more group coaching, female group only coaching programs, and something that we do a lot with organisations. And the reason they can be powerful is because they offer two really, really important things for learning, for exploration, for confidence building. The first one is peer support. So, what we know, and that's why we have schools and they are age specific in things, is our most powerful learning comes from our peers. Obviously, parents have an important role for us, but once we're starting to learn new skills and that, we learn most from people who are of a similar um, age or disposition or level than us, that we can actually learn from each other. It's just something we're hardwired to do. So, peer support learning is very powerful. And when we come off the college track or university track and we go into adult work and the workplace, we often don't have that. We often don't have much that's peer support. So it becomes a really valuable vehicle to allow women to really find their feet and learn skills in a way that they're with an environment of people that are also learning it, but also learning it together, and learning it in a way that they don't feel like they're the only one in the group learning it. And it often accelerates learning to a much greater degree than if we put people of much more disparate groups together. The other part of it, particularly if we use a coaching vehicle for it, is that they can get a bit deeper in exploring their particular way of working, their particular style of working. They can find out the things that are working for them, the things that actually serve them in their ways of working in the organisation and working with people, and maybe also find feedback in a helpful way of the things that don't serve them. So, what are the things that maybe are getting in the way, either in terms of them adopting behaviours that are more aggressive or would be seen that way, or adopting behaviours that are more passive and then actually meaning that they're not being taken as seriously? They're difficult things to get to the bottom of if it feels like they're in a hypercritical or hyper competitive environment. But if they're in a peer group and they're exploring these issues together, it can be much easier to explore them and to go deeper and to understand some of them internal workings. So, if we think about trying to accelerate action, as in the IWD momentum theme this year, we have to think of it into that overall perspective of engagement. How are we engaging people? What I've seen many organisations do, and I've worked with many organisations that do that, is they focus a lot on the representation targets. So we need to get more people of this type, whatever group that might be that's underrepresented, into these levels in the organisation. And I praise them for them. I think representation targets serve a purpose, regardless of what we're hearing. I don't think that they should be something that are thrown out. There's lots of reasons why underrepresentation happens, and actually having targets really helps us to move that forward and break down barriers. But the other part of it very much is the bit about what happens when people are in the organisation, so the engagement. And I can tell you I've seen it again and again and again that people have got somebody who is very qualified, very experienced, ideally suited for the role that they've been employed in. So this is not lowering the bar of expectations to bring somebody in who's not normally the person that they put into that role or the type of person they put in the role. It's not about that at all. But when we find the right person and they're qualified and they're doing a great job in that role, they often don't find that they can stay in the organisation long. And it's because they're left in the role without any of that support around them that would make a difference. They don't feel there's people they can speak to. They don't feel that the sponsors around for them. They don't feel that the culture and the environment allows them to challenge in a way that they will be supported or that their decisions won't be undermined. And what happens is that amazing talent leaves the organisation. So I'll leave you with that comment about thinking about how you create safe, supportive spaces in your organisation, not only for women, but for anyone who might be the only in that team or that part of the organisation. And by doing this, we can help to accelerate action. So I'll be back with you tomorrow with another aspect of how we accelerate action. I hope you find that useful. You can contact me on the comments below or at Mary at agents2, that's the number 2, change.com. And I'd be delighted to help you with any of that or share with you some of the ways that we can build in safe, supportive environments. So I'm wishing you a great day. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope wherever you are able to enjoy at least a small amount of sunshine. Take care for now. Thank you.